The echoes of the bonding ritual still lingered in the corridors of the palace, whispers trailing behind every step Lyra took. She had survived the public gaze, endured the tests of loyalty and cunning, but the court was far from convinced. Blackwood's smile in the shadows promised that the real trial was yet to come. Even Kieran's steady presence beside her could not erase the weight of what was demanded next, a combat challenge she had never trained for. Marcus had sworn to stand as her shield, but in the king's court, victory was rarely won with strength alone. This morning would decide whether she was truly meant to stand at Kieran's side or be cast aside like so many before her. Lyra felt physically sick as she contemplated the harsh reality before her. The law was absolutely clear. Theft was punishable by flogging and imprisonment, regardless of circumstances. But how could any civilized person order a pregnant woman flogged for the crime of trying to feed herself and her unborn child? "Master Willem?" she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent square. "Before I render judgment, I must ask, what would justice look like to you in this case?" The baker shifted uncomfortably. "The law is the law, my lady. She stole from me." "She did," Lyra agreed, "and the law demands punishment. But the law also serves justice, and justice without mercy is merely cruelty." She turned to address the wider crowd. "This woman's husband died in the mines that profit their owners while providing no protection or compensation for the workers who die in their depths. She sought help from our charitable institutions, but was denied for lack of proper documentation." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many had lost family to the mines. "So I ask again," Lyra continued, returning her attention to the baker. "What would justice look like? Would flogging this pregnant widow return your bread? Would imprisoning her feed her unborn child? Or would it simply add more suffering to a world that already has too much?" Master Willem's stern expression wavered. I work hard for my living, my lady. If everyone who was hungry simply took, then perhaps we should ask why so many are hungry," Lyra interrupted gently. "But that is a larger question for another day. Today, we must deal with Elena." She stood, descending from the platform to approach the trembling young woman. "Elena, if given the chance, would you work to repay what you've taken?" "Yes, my lady," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Anything. I'll do anything." Lyra turned back to Master Willem. "I propose an alternative resolution. Elena will work in your bakery for 6 months, receiving fair wages and 2 meals per day. The cost of the stolen bread and any future bread she might need will be deducted from her wages at a rate that allows her to still support herself. After her child is born, if both parties are satisfied, she may continue the employment permanently." "But the law," Duke Blackwood began. "The law allows for judicial discretion in cases of exceptional circumstance," Lyra said firmly. "A pregnant widow with no family and no support certainly qualifies. Furthermore, I'm establishing a new precedent. When someone steals necessities out of genuine desperation rather than greed, they will be offered the chance to work off their debt rather than face physical punishment." She looked directly at Duke Blackwood as she added, "And I'm calling for immediate investigation into the mining company's practice of abandoning the families of workers killed in their service. No widow should have to choose between stealing and starving." The crowd erupted in mixed reactions: approval from the common folk, concern from some nobles. Master Willem looked between Elena and Lyra, clearly wrestling with the decision. I accept this judgment," he finally said. "The girl may work for me as you've described." "Thank you," Elena sobbed, falling to her knees. "Thank you, my lady." Lyra helped her to her feet. "Save your gratitude for Master Willem. He's giving you a chance. Don't waste it." As the baker's wife led Elena away, looking considerably more sympathetic than her husband, Duke Blackwood stood abruptly. "The third scenario," he announced, his voice sharp with barely controlled anger. "This one will truly test your judgment, Lady Lyra." Guards brought forward 4 young nobles in chains. Lyra's heart sank as she recognized Lord Marcus Thornfield among them. His usual easy confidence was intact, but she could see concern in his green eyes. "These 4 stand accused of high treason," Duke Blackwood announced with obvious satisfaction. "They were caught with documents detailing plans to sell kingdom secrets to our enemies in the Eastern Territories. The evidence is irrefutable. Letters in their own hands, discussing troop movements, fortification weaknesses, and trade route intelligence." The crowd's sympathetic mood evaporated instantly. Treason was the ultimate betrayal, punishable only by death. Lyra studied Marcus's face intently, remembering his kindness, his warnings about court dangers. Every instinct screamed this was wrong. "Present the evidence," she commanded. The letters were brought forward in an ornate box. Lyra studied them carefully, her years of copying texts for the Omega House serving her well. The handwriting appeared to be Marcus's, the content thoroughly damning. But something nagged at her, a falseness she couldn't quite identify. "Lord Marcus," she said carefully, "these letters are dated over the past 3 months. Can you account for your whereabouts during this time?" "On diplomatic mission to the Eastern Territories, my lady, by order of His Majesty. I returned only yesterday." Duke Blackwood's smirk widened. "So you admit you were in enemy territory when these treasonous letters were written?" "On official kingdom business," Marcus replied calmly, "with full diplomatic papers and royal escort. My mission was to negotiate new trade agreements, which I completed successfully." Lyra continued examining the letters, then looked up sharply. "Lord Marcus, do you suffer from any injuries to your writing hand?" Marcus looked surprised. "I broke 2 fingers in a training accident 5 weeks ago. They're still splinted, as you can see." He raised his right hand, showing the obvious injury. "Yet these letters dated from 3 weeks ago show perfect penmanship," Lyra observed. "No variation that would indicate injury. Duke Blackwood, how do you explain this?" The Duke's expression tightened. "The accused is obviously lying about his injury." "The injury that multiple witnesses can verify?" Lyra pressed. "Furthermore, all these letters use identical ink, identical parchment. Letters written over 3 months would show natural variation. Different ink batches, paper from different sources. These were all written recently, at the same time." She held up one particular letter. "But most damning to your case, Duke Blackwood, this letter discusses the new Eastern fortifications. Fortifications that were only approved by the Royal Council 2 weeks ago, How could Lord Marcus have written about them 3 months past? The crowd began murmuring excitedly. Lord Pemberton, sitting with the council, shifted uncomfortably. I find Lord Marcus Thornfield and his companions innocent of all charges, Lyra declared. These letters are recent forgeries, created to entrap innocent men. I call for immediate investigation into who created these false documents and why. You exceed your authority, Duke Blackwood snarled. I exercise the judgment you asked me to demonstrate, Lyra replied coolly. Unless you'd prefer I find them guilty based on obviously forged evidence? I'm sure the king would be very interested to know his council tried to execute innocent nobles based on false documents. The threat hung in the air. Duke Blackwood's face had turned an alarming shade of purple, while Lord Pemberton looked genuinely worried. Release them! Duke Blackwood commanded through gritted teeth. As the guards removed the chains, Marcus caught Lyra's eye and bowed deeply, genuine gratitude replacing his usual sardonic expression. The council will deliberate on today's proceedings, Duke Blackwood announced stiffly. We will announce our decision this evening. As the crowd began to disperse, Lyra remained seated, exhaustion washing over her. She'd passed the trial of compassion, but at what cost? She'd made enemies today, powerful ones. That was brilliantly done, a familiar voice said softly. She looked up to find Kieran approaching, his expression mixing pride with concern. You're not supposed to interfere with the trials, she reminded him weakly. I'm not interfering. I'm simply walking through the square and happening to encounter my mate. He sat beside her, careful not to touch. Even that might be seen as influence. The forgery investigation was inspired. How did you know? The ink was too fresh, Lyra explained, and the handwriting was too perfect, like someone carefully copying rather than naturally writing. I've done enough copying work to recognize the difference. Duke Blackwood underestimated you. He's not done yet, Lyra said quietly. Tomorrow's combat trial. He'll have something planned. Sir Garrett Blackstone has been named as the Crown's champion, Kieran confirmed grimly. He's never lost a formal combat. He's known for his brutality. Then I need to find a champion of my own, Lyra said, though she had no idea who would risk their life for a forgotten Omega-turned-controversial queen candidate. You'll find one, Kieran said with quiet confidence. After today's display, I suspect you'll have volunteers. As they parted, separately, to avoid any appearance of impropriety, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest trial was yet to come. Duke Blackwood's fury had been palpable. Whatever he had planned for tomorrow, it would be designed to ensure she failed. But as she walked back to the palace, she noticed something that gave her hope. Common folk approached her, bowing deeply, murmuring thanks. Some pressed small tokens into her hands. A flower, a carved wooden phoenix, a child's drawing of a crowned figure standing up to a dragon labeled Bad Duke. You spoke for us, an elderly woman said, tears in her eyes. No noble ever speaks for us. You saw the truth, a young man added. Lord Marcus helped my village during the drought. We knew he was no traitor. By the time she reached the palace, Lyra had collected dozens of small tributes and countless whispered thanks. Lord Aldrich met her at the entrance, his expression unreadable. "Your Majesty wishes to speak with you," he said formally. "Privately, in his study." Lyra's heart raced. Had she overstepped? Would Kieran withdraw his claim? But when she entered the study, Kieran's expression was warm with pride. "You were magnificent today. The way you handled each scenario, especially Duke Blackwood's trap." "I may have made things worse," Lyra admitted. "He was furious." "He was exposed," Kieran corrected. "His plan to frame Marcus failed because he underestimated you. But Lyra," his expression grew serious, "tomorrow will be dangerous. Blackstone doesn't just defeat opponents, he destroys them. And Duke Blackwood will ensure the combat is as brutal as possible." "Then I need the best champion available," Lyra said with more confidence than she felt. "You'll have one," a new voice said from the doorway. Lord Marcus entered, still rubbing his wrists where the chains had been. "Lady Lyra, you saved my life today. Allow me to return the favor." "Marcus, no," Kieran said immediately. "Blackstone will try to kill me? Probably." Marcus shrugged with his characteristic nonchalance, though Lyra could see the seriousness in his eyes. "But I'm not without skill. And more importantly, I'm not without motivation." Lyra proved today that she'll be a queen who values justice over politics, truth over convenience. That's worth fighting for. "I can't ask this of you," Lyra protested. "You're not asking. I'm offering." His grin turned sharp. "Besides, I owe Duke Blackwood for trying to frame me. What better revenge than defeating his chosen champion?" After Marcus left, Kieran pulled Lyra into his arms. Protocol be damned. "I'm proud of you," he murmured, "but I'm also terrified. If something happens tomorrow, then we face it together," Lyra said, echoing his words from days ago. "That's what mates do." They stood together in the gathering dusk, both knowing that tomorrow would bring either triumph or tragedy. The combat trial would determine not just Lyra's worthiness, but the future of the kingdom itself. Outside, the common folk were still celebrating their queen candidate who'd stood for justice. Inside the palace, nobles whispered and plotted. And somewhere in the shadows, Duke Blackwood planned his final move. The forgotten Omega had passed 2 trials. One more stood between her and a crown, but it would be the deadliest of all. Dawn broke gray and ominous over the kingdom, matching the dread that had kept Lyra awake through the night. She stood at her window in the Luna suite, watching servants prepare the combat platform in the courtyard below. The massive structure dominated the space, surrounded by tiered seating that was already beginning to fill despite the early hour. "You didn't sleep," Kieran observed from the doorway. She turned to face him, seeing her own exhaustion mirrored in his features. "Neither did you." He crossed to her in 3 quick strides, pulling her into his arms. "How could I? Knowing what you faced today, knowing I can't protect you." "Marcus will protect me," she said, trying to inject confidence into her voice. "Marcus is skilled, but Blackstone is a killer." Kieran's arms tightened around her. "If I could take his place—" "The law forbids it," she finished. "Mates cannot champion each other in these trials." A soft knock interrupted them. Lady Meredith entered, followed by Lady Celeste and Vivian. Over the past days, Lyra had grown to appreciate their different strengths. Meredith's surprising courage, Celeste's political acumen despite her calculating nature, and Vivian's sharp intelligence. "My lady," Meredith said gently, "we've come to help you prepare." As her ladies-in-waiting dressed her in deep purple, the color of royalty and mourning both, Celeste spoke carefully. "The entire court is talking about yesterday's trial. You've made quite an impression." "Good or bad?" Lyra asked. "Both," Vivian answered honestly. "The common folk see you as their champion. Many nobles are reconsidering their positions." "And Duke Blackwood?" The three women exchanged glances. "Furious," Celeste admitted. "He spent the night in conference with Lord Pemberton and others. They're planning something." Before Lyra could respond, Lord Aldrich appeared at the door. The king's chief advisor looked troubled. "Your presence is requested in the small council chamber, my lady. Lord Marcus wishes to speak with you before the combat." Lyra found Marcus in the chamber, already dressed in lighter armor that would allow for quick movement. Gone was his usual casual demeanor. He looked focused, deadly serious. "Are you certain about this?" she asked without preamble. "Completely." He tested the balance of his sword with practiced ease. "I've been training since childhood, you know. The wastrel courtier persona is partly protective coloring." "Why hide your skills?" "Because in this court, it's often safer to be underestimated." His expression grew grim. "Blackstone won't make that mistake. He studied every fighter in the kingdom. He knows I'm competent." "Then why?" "Because someone needs to stand for you, and I have the best chance." He met her eyes directly. "Lyra, what you did yesterday, standing for truth even when it was dangerous, that matters. This kingdom needs a queen who values justice over politics." "I'm just an Omega who got lucky," Lyra said, old insecurities surfacing. "No," Marcus said firmly. "You're an Omega who refused to be invisible, who turned disadvantage into strength, who sees people others overlook." He managed his familiar grin. "Besides, after you saved me from Duke Blackwood's frame job, I owe you a life debt." "You owe me nothing." "I owe you everything, but we can debate that after I win." He bowed formally. "Now go. The combat begins soon, and you need to look every inch the future queen." The arena was packed beyond capacity. Every noble in the kingdom seemed to have come, along with thousands of common folk who filled every available space. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and dread. Lyra took her place in the royal box, Kieran beside her, their hands carefully not touching to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Her three ladies-in-waiting stood behind her, a show of support. Lord Aldrich sat to Kieran's other side, his expression neutral as always. Duke Blackwood rose to address the crowd, satisfaction poorly concealed in his bearing. Lord Pemberton watched from his council seat with cold calculation. "Lords and ladies," Duke Blackwood announced, his voice carrying easily, "we gather for the final trial, combat, to prove that our future queen has the strength to defend the kingdom's honor." The crowd stirred as Sir Garrett Blackstone entered the arena. Lyra's heart sank at the sight of him. He was massive, taller even than Kieran, with muscles that strained against his heavy armor. Scars covered his exposed skin, testament to countless brutal victories. His reputation preceded him. A man who didn't just defeat opponents, but destroyed them, who took pleasure in violence. When Blackstone looked toward the royal box, Lyra saw hunger in his eyes, not for her, but for the carnage to come. As the crown's champion, Duke Blackwood continued, clearly savoring the moment, Sir Garrett Blackstone will face whoever Lady Lyra has chosen to defend her claim. Marcus entered from the opposite side, and the contrast was stark. Next to Blackstone's bulk, he looked almost fragile. But Lyra noticed things others might miss. The perfect balance in his stance, the easy way he carried his sword, the calm focus that spoke of real skill rather than mere training. Lord Marcus Thornfield stands as my champion, Lyra announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The court libertine against our greatest warrior? Duke Blackwood said loudly enough for all to hear. This should be brief. Blackstone laughed, the sound like grinding stone. Ready to die for your Omega whore, Thornfield? The insult made Kieran surge to his feet, but Lyra caught his arm. They couldn't show weakness now. Marcus's expression didn't change. Are you ready to stop talking and fight? Or do you plan to bore me to death with your crude attempts at wit? The crowd chuckled nervously. Even facing death, Marcus maintained his characteristic sharp tongue. The combat continues until one yields or dies, Duke Blackwood announced with relish. Begin! Blackstone charged immediately, his massive sword cleaving the air with deadly force. But Marcus was already moving, spinning aside with fluid grace. As Blackstone's momentum carried him past, Marcus's blade flicked out, scoring a thin line across the larger man's arm. First blood to Lord Marcus! Someone in the crowd called. Blackstone wheeled with surprising speed for his size, his face darkening with rage. Lucky hit, Peacock! You won't get another! What followed was a deadly dance. Blackstone attacked with devastating power, strikes that shattered the wooden barriers when they missed, blows that would crush bones if they connected. But Marcus refused to meet strength with strength. He redirected, deflected, danced away, making the larger man work for every attack. Stand and fight, coward! Blackstone roared after several frustrating minutes. I am fighting, Marcus replied calmly, adding another small cut to Blackstone's collection. Just efficiently. Why exhaust myself matching your brute force when I can let you tire yourself out? The crowd began to murmur. This wasn't the quick execution they'd expected. Marcus was implementing a clear strategy, using Blackstone's size and heavy armor against him, forcing him to chase, making him work. Lady Vivian leaned forward. He's trained in the Eastern style? She murmured to Lyra. Efficiency over power, precision over force. But Blackstone hadn't become the kingdom's deadliest warrior through strength alone. He began adapting, cutting off Marcus's escape routes, using the arena's boundaries to trap him. He's learning Marcus's patterns. Celeste observed, worry creeping into her usually controlled voice. Indeed, Blackstone was slowly but steadily cornering Marcus, forcing him toward the platform's edge where mobility would be limited. The crowd held its breath as the space for maneuvering shrank. Then disaster struck. Marcus, dodging another massive swing, stepped in a patch of blood from their earlier exchanges. His foot slipped just slightly, but it was enough. Blackstone's sword caught him across the ribs, sending him spinning to the ground. "No!" The word tore from Lyra's throat before she could stop it. Blood spread across Marcus's shirt as he rolled desperately away from Blackstone's follow-up strike. The massive sword slammed into the platform where he'd been, sending splinters flying. "Now you die, pretty boy!" Blackstone snarled, advancing on the wounded man. Marcus struggled to his feet, switching his sword to his left hand. His right arm hung uselessly, blood dripping from his fingers. "Marcus yields!" Lyra started to shout, but Kieran grabbed her arm. "He has to say it himself," he said grimly. "And look at him. He won't." Indeed, Marcus raised his sword again, eyes blazing with determination despite the pain. "Not finished yet." Blackstone laughed cruelly. "No, but you will be soon." He raised his massive sword for a killing blow, and Marcus moved, not away, but forward inside Blackstone's guard. It was a desperate gambit. If it failed, he'd be completely defenseless. But Marcus's blade found its target, sliding between armor plates with surgical precision. For a moment, they stood frozen. Marcus's sword buried in Blackstone's side. Blackstone's sword raised, but unable to complete its arc. Then Blackstone's eyes widened in shock. He dropped his weapon, falling to his knees. "I yield!" he gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. The arena erupted. Marcus staggered back, barely keeping his feet, as healers rushed onto the platform. But his eyes found Lyra's across the distance, and he managed a weak smile before his legs gave out entirely. "Lord Marcus is victorious," the herald announced over the chaos. "Lady Lyra has passed the trial by combat." Relief flooded through Lyra so powerfully she swayed. Meredith steadied her as healers worked frantically on both wounded champions. But Duke Blackwood wasn't finished. As the crowd celebrated Marcus's unlikely victory, the Duke rose with theatrical deliberation. "Impressive," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Most impressive. However, there remains one final matter." Lyra's stomach dropped. What more could he demand? "The test of worthiness is complete," Kieran said sharply, rising from his seat. "3 trials, as ancient law demands." "Indeed," Duke Blackwood agreed smoothly. "The 3 trials of ability are complete, but there is an additional provision, rarely invoked but legally binding, that may be demanded when the royal succession is in question." He paused, clearly savoring the confusion rippling through the crowd. Even Lord Aldrich looked uncertain. "The test of blood," Duke Blackwood announced. "Not the blood of combat, but the blood that ensures our kingdom's future." "Explain yourself," Kieran commanded, his voice dangerous. "It's quite simple," Duke Blackwood said, turning to address the entire assembly. "Our investigation into Lady Lyra's background revealed some concerning information. She was previously mated for 5 years. 5 years without producing a single heir." The words hit Lyra like physical blows. The shame she'd carried for years, the secret pain of her barrenness, was being exposed before thousands. She heard gasps from the crowd, saw the way people looked at her change. "A barren queen cannot secure the succession," Duke Blackwood continued ruthlessly. The test of blood demands proof that she can provide heirs. Unless Lady Lyra can demonstrate her fertility. Enough! Kieran's roar silenced the arena. Power radiated from him in almost visible waves. You dare use such a personal matter as a political weapon? I dare speak the truth the kingdom needs to hear, Duke Blackwood countered. Every noble, every citizen will wonder, can their queen provide the stability of succession? It's a legitimate concern. Lyra stood on trembling legs. She had to speak, had to defend herself, though the words felt like ash in her mouth. Duke Blackwood speaks truth, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The crowd leaned in to hear. I was mated for 5 years without conceiving. My former mate cast me aside for this failing. The silence was deafening. She saw pity in some faces, disgust in others, calculation in many noble expressions. But I ask you, she continued, finding strength in Kieran's steady presence, is a woman's worth measured only by her womb? Is a queen valued only for the heirs she might produce? That's exactly what a barren woman would say. Someone called from the noble section. The words cut deep, but Lyra raised her chin. Then let me be clear. I cannot promise you heirs. I cannot swear that my body will do what it refused to do for 5 years. But I can promise you this. I will serve this kingdom with every breath in my body, fertile or not. I will fight for justice, for the forgotten, for those who've been told they're worthless. And if the gods see fit to bless me with children, I will raise them to do the same. Pretty words, Duke Blackwood said dismissively. But the succession? The succession is my concern. Kieran interrupted. I choose Lyra knowing her history. That should tell you everything about my priorities. But Lyra could see the damage was done. The doubt was planted. Even if she officially passed the trials, she would always be the barren queen, the Omega who couldn't fulfill a woman's most basic purpose. Duke Blackwood smiled, knowing he'd won even in defeat. The council will deliberate on all 3 trials. We will announce our final decision at sunset. As the crowd dispersed, whispers followed Lyra like a curse. Barren, 5 years without conceiving. What kind of queen? Poor king. Lyra fled the arena as soon as protocol allowed, unable to bear the weight of all those judging stares. She ran through the palace corridors, seeking somewhere to hide, somewhere to fall apart without witnesses to her shame. She found herself in the library where she'd first truly spoken with Marcus, collapsing into a chair as sobs racked her body. All the strength she'd shown during the trials meant nothing if she couldn't fulfill the most basic expectation of a queen. Planning to hide here forever? She looked up to find Marcus in the doorway, pale and bandaged, but standing on his own feet. A young healer hovered anxiously behind him. You should be in bed, Lyra said, wiping futilely at her tears. So should you. He waved off the healer and made his way carefully to a chair. That was quite a dramatic revelation Blackwood orchestrated. It wasn't a revelation to me, Lyra said bitterly. I've lived with that shame for years. 5 years of treatments, prayers, remedies, all worthless. I'm as barren as a stone. Marcus studied her with those perceptive green eyes. Tell me about your former mate. Why? So you can pity me too. Humor a wounded man, he said gently. Lyra sighed. Garrett of House Pinehurst? Traditional, proud, demanding. He wanted heirs desperately, and I failed him. When he finally cast me aside, he said I was defective merchandise, not fit for anything but the Omega House. Garrett of House Pinehurst, Marcus repeated thoughtfully. Interesting. What's interesting about my humiliation? The Pinehurst line has a reputation, Marcus said carefully. One that's whispered about but never spoken aloud. Tell me, did Garrett remarry after casting you aside? Yes, twice, I heard. Why? Any children from those marriages? Lyra frowned. I don't know. I tried not to think about him after... She stopped, understanding dawning. You're not suggesting... The Pinehurst line has struggled with fertility for generations, Marcus said quietly. It's an open secret among the nobility. Garrett's father took 4 wives before managing a single heir. His grandfather, 3 wives. The men of that house are notoriously poor at siring children. But they always blame their wives. The world tilted beneath Lyra's feet. That's not possible, the healers said. What did the healers say? Exactly? Lyra tried to remember through the haze of pain. They said they couldn't find anything wrong with me, but obviously something was wrong. 5 years. 5 years with a man who likely couldn't sire children with anyone. Marcus finished. Lyra, has it occurred to you that the failing might never have been yours? Before she could process this earth-shattering possibility, Kieran appeared in the doorway. His relief at finding her was palpable. Leave us, he told Marcus gently but firmly. Marcus rose carefully. Think about what I said, Lyra. And remember, Duke Blackwood has his own motivations for wanting you to fail. Question everything. When they were alone, Kieran approached slowly, as if she might flee again. Lyra, don't, she interrupted. Don't tell me it doesn't matter. Don't lie to make me feel better. I wasn't going to. He knelt before her chair, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. I was going to say that I meant every word in that arena. I choose you, knowing everything. If we have children, they'll be blessed to have you as a mother. If we don't, then we'll fill our lives with other purposes. Either way, I want you beside me. The kingdom needs heirs. The kingdom needs a queen who understands suffering, who fights for justice, who sees the forgotten. Everything else is secondary. He pressed her hands to his lips. You are not broken, Lyra. You are not worthless. You are mine, and I am yours. And that is enough. She broke down then, sobbing into his shoulder, as years of pain poured out. He held her through it all, murmuring comfort, his presence, an anchor in the storm. When her tears finally slowed, he pulled back to look at her. There's something else. Lord Aldrich has been investigating Duke Blackwood's sudden knowledge of your past. It seems he's been receiving information from someone who knew you before. Who? We're not certain yet. But Lyra, I need you to be strong a little longer. The council meets in an hour. Whatever happens, we face it together. As the sun set, they made their way to the throne room. The entire court had assembled, the atmosphere thick with tension and anticipation. Lyra noticed how the crowd seemed divided, common folk watching her with sympathy and hope, nobles with calculation and judgment. Lady Meredith surprised everyone by approaching Lyra directly. "My lady," she said, loud enough for others to hear, "I wanted you to know what Duke Blackwood did was cruel and wrong. A woman's worth isn't in her womb." "Thank you," Lyra whispered, touched by the unexpected support. Lady Celeste and Vivian flanked her other side, creating a protective formation. Even calculating Celeste seemed offended by Duke Blackwood's tactics. The council filed in with solemn ceremony. Duke Blackwood looked smugly satisfied, while Lord Pemberton appeared troubled. The other 3 council members were harder to read. "We have deliberated on the 3 trials," Duke Blackwood announced, clearly having appointed himself spokesperson. "And we have reached our decisions." The throne room fell silent. On the trial of wisdom, Lady Lyra demonstrated unexpected intelligence and insight. By a vote of 3-2, she passed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lyra kept her expression neutral, waiting. On the trial of compassion, Lady Lyra showed remarkable judgment and introduced innovative solutions. By a vote of 3-2, she passed. More murmurs, louder now. But Lyra could see the trap in Duke Blackwood's expression. On the trial of combat, Lord Marcus Thornfield emerged victorious as Lady Lyra's champion. This trial was unanimously passed. He paused dramatically. "However," he continued, satisfaction dripping from the word, "the matter of succession cannot be ignored. A queen who cannot provide heirs endangers the kingdom's future. Therefore, Your Grace," Lord Aldrich interrupted smoothly, stepping forward. "Before you continue, perhaps the council should hear some new information that has come to light." Duke Blackwood's expression soured. "Lord Aldrich, this is highly irregular." "As is condemning a woman based on incomplete information," Aldrich replied. He pulled out a leather portfolio. "I've had investigators looking into the claims about Lady Lyra's supposed barrenness. What they found is illuminating." Kieran leaned forward. "Proceed." "First, regarding Lord Garrett of House Pinehurst, Lady Lyra's former mate," Aldrich began. "He has indeed remarried twice since casting Lady Lyra aside. Neither marriage has produced children. His brother mated for 8 years. No children. Their cousin mated thrice. No children." Gasps echoed through the throne room. Lyra felt the world spinning. "Furthermore," Aldrich continued, "we found records of payments from Duke Blackwood's personal accounts to Lord Garrett beginning shortly after Lady Lyra's bond was dissolved. Regular payments marked for services rendered." "Lies!" Duke Blackwood snarled. "You dare?" "I dare present evidence," Aldrich said calmly. He pulled out more documents. "We also have testimony from a healer who treated Lord Garrett years ago. Under truth compulsion, she confirmed that she informed him of likely fertility issues common to the Pinehurst line. He threatened her into silence." The throne room exploded. Nobles shouted in outrage. Common folk jeered, and through it all, Lyra stood frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. "Lord Garrett of House Pinehurst!" Kieran commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Step forward." From among the nobles, a man emerged. Lyra's former mate looked older than she remembered, his once handsome face marked by dissipation. He couldn't meet her eyes. Is this testimony accurate? Kieran demanded. Garrett's shoulders slumped. The healers said it was possible. The Pinehurst curse, they called it. But I couldn't accept it. So you blamed your wife instead? It was easier, Garrett admitted, his voice barely audible. And when Duke Blackwood offered gold to ensure she never rose above her station, I took it. 5 years, Lyra whispered, finding her voice at last. 5 years I believed I was broken. Garrett finally looked at her, and she saw something she'd never expected. Shame. I'm sorry, he said quietly. It was cruel and wrong. I destroyed you to save my own pride. You destroyed me, Lyra repeated, years of pain crystallizing into cold fury. Made me believe I was worthless. And for what? Gold? Your reputation? Yes, he said simply. I have no excuse. Duke Blackwood. Kieran's voice was deadly calm. You conspired to destroy an innocent woman's life for political gain. You corrupted these sacred trials with lies. You have betrayed every principle of nobility. I acted in the kingdom's best interests, Blackwood declared defiantly. An Omega Queen would weaken us. An Omega Queen stands before you with more integrity than you've shown in your entire life, Kieran interrupted. Guards, arrest him for conspiracy, corruption, and treason. As Blackwood was dragged away protesting, Lyra felt something fundamental shift inside her. The shame she'd carried for so long began to crumble, replaced by a burning mixture of rage and liberation. My lords and ladies, she said, her voice carrying clearly despite her emotional turmoil. I stand before you, having been lied to, conspired against, and nearly destroyed by those who feared what I represented. But I also stand before you, unbroken. She looked around the throne room, meeting eyes both sympathetic and hostile. Duke Blackwood was right about one thing. I cannot promise you heirs, not because I'm barren, but because fertility is never guaranteed, regardless of cruel lies. What I can promise is this: I will be a queen who values truth over comfortable lies, justice over tradition, compassion over cruelty. And if the gods see fit to bless me with children, I will raise them to do the same. Furthermore, she continued, her voice gaining strength, I call for immediate investigation into all noble fertility claims. How many other women have been cast aside based on lies? How many lives destroyed to protect male pride? This systematic cruelty ends now. The crowd erupted in approval, even many nobles nodding agreement. The evidence was too damning to deny. Lord Pemberton stood slowly. In light of these revelations, I move to confirm Lady Lyra as our queen. The trials were past, the deception exposed. She has proven herself worthy. One by one, the other council members stood in agreement. The council unanimously confirms Lady Lyra as queen of this realm, Lord Aldrich announced formally. Long may she reign. The cheers were deafening, but Lyra barely heard them. She was looking at Garrett, who stood abandoned by his fellow nobles, finally facing the consequences of his lies. Lord Garrett, she said, her voice cutting through the celebration. You destroyed 5 years of my life, nearly destroyed all of it. What would you have me do with you? He looked up, surprised by the question. I expect punishment. I deserve it. Yes, you do, Lyra agreed, but punishment alone changes nothing. Instead, you will spend the next 5 years, one for each year you stole from me, working to help women you and others like you have wronged. You will use your wealth to establish sanctuaries for cast-aside women. You will publicly acknowledge your lies and the lies of your family. You will make amends not through suffering, but through service. Yes, Your Majesty, Garrett said, something like relief in his voice. It's more than I deserve. It's a chance to be better than you were. Lyra corrected, don't waste it. As guards led him away to begin his sentence of service, Kieran took Lyra's hand, raising it high. Lords and ladies, I present Queen Lyra Blackthorn, proven worthy not by birth, but by character, not by lies, but by truth. Long live the Queen! Long live the Queen! The crowd roared back. But Lyra barely heard them. She was thinking of all the women like her, cast aside based on lies, living in shame that was never theirs to bear. Tomorrow she would begin the work of finding them, helping them, showing them the truth. Tonight, though, she simply stood with her mate and let the truth wash over her. She was not broken. She had never been broken. She had been lied to by those who feared her strength. And now, finally, she was free. 3 months after her coronation, Queen Lyra stood before the grand doors of what would become the first Phoenix House. The former summer palace had been transformed into a sanctuary for women cast aside as barren, its rooms converted into living quarters, workspaces, and healing chambers. Your Majesty! Lady Meredith approached, now serving as Lyra's chief advisor with surprising competence. The first residents have arrived. 23 women stood in the courtyard, ranging in age from barely 20 to past 60. Each carried the same haunted look Lyra recognized from her own mirror, the weight of shame that wasn't theirs to bear. Welcome, Lyra said, descending to meet them, not as queen, but as fellow survivor. I know you're frightened. I know you feel worthless. I know because I've been where you are. An older woman stepped forward hesitantly. Your Majesty, we heard, is it true, about the Pinehurst curse, about the lies? Every word, Lyra confirmed. I spent 5 years believing I was barren. My former mate knew the truth, but blamed me to protect his pride. And I'm learning this deception is widespread throughout the nobility. She gestured to Lord Marcus, who had taken on the role of royal investigator with enthusiasm. Lord Marcus has already documented 17 similar cases. Noble bloodlines with known fertility issues, but always the women are blamed. 17? A younger woman gasped. That we've found so far, Marcus corrected. I suspect there are hundreds, possibly thousands over the generations. The women looked at each other with dawning hope and rage in equal measure. Phoenix House isn't just a sanctuary, Lyra continued. It's a place of truth and transformation. Here, you'll have access to healers who will give you honest answers about your health. You'll learn trades, skills, find new purposes beyond the role you were told you failed at. Most importantly, you'll learn that your worth was never determined by your womb. As Lady Meredith led the women inside for orientation, Lord Aldrich approached. Your Majesty, we have a situation. Duke Blackwood is demanding a final statement before his exile begins tomorrow. Let him speak, Lyra decided. In open court, Let everyone hear what he has to say. The throne room was packed for Blackwood's final appearance. He stood in chains but unbroken, his arrogance intact despite his fall. "You think you've won!" He addressed Lyra directly, ignoring protocol. "But mark my words, this kingdom will rue the day it accepted an Omega Queen. You're overturning centuries of tradition, destroying the natural order." "The natural order that said I was worthless?" Lyra interrupted calmly. "The tradition that allowed men to destroy women with lies? Yes, Duke Blackwood, I'm destroying those things. Gladly. You'll bring chaos. I'll bring change. There's a difference." She stood, addressing the court. "Duke Blackwood represents the old way, power through deception, control through shame, tradition that serves only those already in power. That way dies today." She returned her attention to the fallen Duke. "Your exile begins at dawn. Use it to reflect on the lives you've destroyed. Maybe someday you'll understand the evil you perpetrated." As he was led away, still protesting, Kieran spoke. "Let it be known throughout the realm. Any person cast aside for barrenness has the right to sanctuary at Phoenix House. Any noble who perpetrated such deception will face justice. The age of lies is over." That night, as Lyra reviewed applications for Phoenix House, already over 50, Kieran found her in their private study. "You're working too hard," he said gently. "The kingdom won't transform overnight." "But these women have waited long enough," she replied, showing him a particularly heartbreaking letter. "This one was cast aside 20 years ago. 20 years of believing she was broken." He pulled her into his arms. "We'll help them all, but you need to take care of yourself too." "I will. She paused, then looked up at him. "I've been thinking about what Lord Marcus said, about the Pinehurst line. What if I'm not actually barren? Then we'll discover that truth together." Kieran said simply, "And if you are, it changes nothing between us." "I want to know," she decided. "I want Dr. Aldwin to examine me properly without assumptions. I need to know the truth, whatever it is." The examination took place a week later. Dr. Aldwin, the royal physician, was thorough and methodical, using techniques he'd researched specifically for cases like Lyra's. "Your Majesty," he said finally, his weathered face kind. "I can find no impediment to conception on your part. In fact, you appear to be in excellent reproductive health." Lyra's world tilted. "But 5 years?" 5 years with a partner who likely had severely compromised fertility, the doctor corrected gently. The Pinehurst line's issues are well documented in medical texts, though rarely spoken of publicly. Your inability to conceive was almost certainly not your fault. She left the examination in a daze. Not barren, never barren. The fundamental truth she'd built her identity around, her worthlessness, her failure, was a lie. That night, she stood on her balcony overlooking the kingdom, tears streaming down her face. Kieran found her there. "I'm not broken," she whispered. "All those years, I was never broken." "No," he agreed, holding her as she shook with the force of her emotions. "You were lied to by someone who should have protected you. But Lyra, even if the examination had shown otherwise, you would still not be broken. Your worth—" "I know," she interrupted. "I know my worth isn't in my womb, but to learn that even that shame was false." She turned to face him. How many others, Kieran? How many women are living with false shame? We'll find them all, he promised. Every last one. 6 months later, Phoenix House had expanded to 3 locations. Over 200 women had found sanctuary, and investigations had revealed a staggering scope of deception among the nobility. Lyra stood before a special court assembly, presenting the findings. In the past 6 months, she announced, we have documented 237 cases of women falsely blamed for fertility issues. Noble bloodlines known to have problems, hidden behind lies and female sacrifice. The crowd stirred uneasily, many noble families shifting uncomfortably. Furthermore, we've discovered systematic suppression of medical knowledge. Healers threatened or bribed into silence. Documents destroyed, all to maintain the lie that infertility is always the woman's fault. She gestured to a group of women in the gallery, Phoenix House residents who had chosen to attend. These women were told they were worthless. They lived in shame, some for decades. Today, that ends. By royal decree, any marriage dissolved for barrenness must be reviewed. Any found to be based on deception will result in restitution for the wronged party. This will destroy noble bloodlines. Lord Pemberton protested, though less forcefully than he might have before. Then perhaps those bloodlines should have been built on truth rather than lies. Lyra replied coolly. What followed was a social revolution. Noble houses scrambled to preempt investigations by confessing their deceptions. Women who had lived in shadow for years suddenly found themselves vindicated, compensated, free. Not everyone accepted the changes gracefully. A group calling themselves the Order of the Silver Moon formed among conservative nobles, dedicated to preserving traditional values. They're planning something, Marcus warned during a private council meeting. My sources say they're gathering support, spreading propaganda against your reforms. Let them, Lyra said firmly. Truth has a way of defeating lies, given time. But the Order's first strike came sooner than expected and from an unexpected direction. During a public ceremony at Phoenix House, Lord Garrett of House Pinehurst arrived unexpectedly. He'd spent 6 months funding sanctuaries as part of his sentence, but this was his first direct appearance. Your Majesty, he said, bowing low, I've come to warn you. The Order of the Silver Moon plans to poison the Harvest Festival. They want to blame it on the integration of commoners and nobles, turn public opinion against your reforms. Lyra studied her former mate. He looked different, humbled, genuine in a way he'd never been during their marriage. Why tell me this? She asked. Because I've seen what my lies wrought, he said simply. Not just on you, but on every woman blamed for male failings. I want to be better than I was. Information for redemption? Kieran asked coldly. Information freely given, Garrett corrected. I seek no reward. I've joined no order. I couldn't let more innocents suffer for noble pride. After extracting all relevant information, Lyra made a decision that surprised everyone. You'll help us stop them, she told Garrett. Publicly. Stand with us against those who would maintain the old lies. Yes, Your Majesty. It's more than I deserve. It's a chance to truly change, Lyra corrected. Don't waste it. The harvest festival arrived with unusual warmth for autumn. For the first time, Lyra had insisted on opening the palace grounds to everyone, noble and common sharing the same spaces, Phoenix House residents mingling freely. As the Order's agents moved to distribute poisoned food to the common tables, they found guards waiting. The conspiracy was exposed publicly, dramatically, with several high-ranking nobles caught in the act. "They would have murdered innocents," Lyra announced to the shocked crowd, "to maintain their power. This is what the traditional values truly mean, valuing control over lives." The Order crumbled overnight, its members fleeing or begging forgiveness. But more importantly, public support for Lyra's reforms solidified. The kingdom had seen clearly what the old ways truly represented. That night, as the festival continued with renewed celebration, Lyra found a moment of quiet in her garden. She thought of the forgotten Omega she'd been, of the queen she'd become, of all the women whose lives were changing because one king had chosen to see her worth. "Regrets?" Kieran asked, joining her. "None," she said firmly. "Every challenge was worth this, worth seeing them free." "And you?" he asked gently. "Are you free?" Lyra considered. The shame was gone, replaced by purpose. The lies had been exposed, replaced by truth. But more than that, she'd found her voice, her strength, her reason for surviving all those years of pain. "I'm free," she confirmed, "and I'll spend the rest of my life ensuring others find that same freedom." As fireworks lit the sky above the celebrating kingdom, Lyra made a private vow. The forgotten Omega was gone, but she would never forget her. That pain had become purpose, that shame had become strength, and that forgotten girl had become a queen who would ensure no one else walked that path alone. The phoenix had risen from the ashes of lies, and its fire would light the way for all who followed. 1 year after Phoenix House opened its doors, Lyra stood before a gathering unlike any the kingdom had ever seen. Representatives from 12 neighboring realms had come to witness what many called the Phoenix Revolution, a complete transformation of how society viewed fertility, worth, and women's value. "Your Majesties," the ambassador from the Eastern Territories began, "what you've accomplished here seems impossible. Our nobles resist even discussing such changes." "All change seems impossible until it happens," Lyra replied. "We started with truth, exposing the lies about fertility. Everything else followed naturally." Lord Marcus, now formally titled Royal Investigator and Phoenix House Administrator, presented the yearly report. "In 12 months, we've served over 500 women across 5 Phoenix House locations. We've documented 412 cases of false barrenness claims. Noble houses have paid over 1 million gold marks in restitution." "But the real change," Lady Meredith added, having grown into her role magnificently, "is in the hearts of our people. Young women no longer fear being cast aside. Noble houses are being honest about fertility challenges. Marriage contracts now require mutual medical examination." "You've destroyed centuries of tradition," one visiting duke said, though he sounded more awed than critical. "We've destroyed centuries of lies," Kieran corrected firmly. "Truth isn't destruction. It's foundation for building something better." After the formal presentations, Lyra walked among the Phoenix House residents who'd come to share their stories. Each woman represented a life reclaimed, a truth revealed, a future restored. "Your Majesty," a young woman approached hesitantly. "I'm Sarah Moonwhisper. We might be related?" Lyra's breath caught. Another Moonwhisper. Her own bloodline had been so thoroughly forgotten she hadn't even considered surviving relatives. "Tell me," she said gently, taking Sarah's hands. "My grandmother was cast aside as barren 40 years ago. She lived in shame until she died last winter. But before she passed, she heard about Phoenix House, about you. She said our family had worth after all. That being forgotten didn't mean being worthless." Tears flowed freely down Lyra's cheeks. She was right. We've always had worth. It just took time for the world to see it. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Dr. Aldwin approached with barely contained excitement. "Your Majesty, I've been researching fertility treatments based on our new understanding. Without the assumption that women are always at fault, we've made remarkable progress. Several Phoenix House residents who wish to try have successfully conceived. How many? 17 so far, with more showing promising signs. It seems when you remove shame and provide proper medical support, many barren women aren't barren at all." Lyra felt joy for those women, but also a familiar ache. Despite being proven fertile, she and Kieran had not yet conceived. It was a cruel irony, spending years believing she was barren, only to discover she wasn't, yet still having empty arms. "Your Majesty," Dr. Aldwin continued gently, "I know you and His Majesty have been hoping. These new treatments are for those who wish to try them," Lyra finished. "I won't put that pressure on myself. If it happens, wonderful. If not, I have hundreds of daughters in every Phoenix house." That evening, Lyra found herself in an unexpected confrontation. Lady Vivian, her formerly sharp-eyed lady-in-waiting, had requested a private audience. "I need to confess something," Vivian said without preamble. "Duke Blackwood didn't discover your past on his own. I told him." The words hit like a physical blow. "You betrayed me?" "I thought I was protecting the kingdom," Vivian said miserably. "I believed the lies about Omega weakness, but watching you these past months, seeing what you've built, I was wrong. Completely, horribly wrong." Lyra studied the woman who'd helped dress her for the trials, who'd stood by her side through the early days of her reign. "Why tell me now?" "Because guilt is eating me alive. Because you deserve truth. Because I want to atone, if you'll let me." "How?" "Let me work at Phoenix House. Let me spend my life helping women I once would have scorned. Let me learn to be better than I was." After a long moment, Lyra nodded. "Everyone deserves a chance to change. Report to Lord Marcos tomorrow. But Vivian, there will be no position of power for you. You'll start at the bottom, serving those you once thought beneath you." "It's more than I deserve," Vivian said, tears flowing. "Thank you." As months passed, changes rippled outward like stones thrown in still water. The Phoenix Accords, a comprehensive set of laws protecting women from false barrenness claims, were adopted by 3 neighboring kingdoms. Phoenix houses opened in 6 more locations. The culture slowly, steadily shifted. But not everyone celebrated these changes. "Your Majesty," Lord Aldrich reported during a security briefing, We've intercepted communications about a new threat. Extremist nobles from multiple kingdoms are uniting. They call themselves the Brotherhood of Ancient Blood. Let me guess, Marcus said dryly. They want to preserve traditional values and put women back in their powerless places? Essentially, yes. But they're more organized than the Order of the Silver Moon, and they have international support. Then we'll need international response, Lyra decided. Send messages to every kingdom that's adopted the Phoenix Accords. If they unite against us, we unite against them. The confrontation came sooner than expected. During a celebration marking the 1,000th woman served by Phoenix House, attackers struck, not with poison this time, but with violence. Armed men storming the Phoenix House grounds. But they hadn't counted on the residents fighting back. These weren't broken women anymore, but survivors who'd found their strength. They fought with improvised weapons, with fury born of years of oppression, with the fierce protectiveness of those who refused to lose their sanctuary. Lyra herself joined the battle, no longer the forgotten Omega, but a queen defending her people. Beside her fought Kieran, Marcus, and surprisingly, Garrett of House Pinehurst, who'd been visiting to donate more funds. "Behind you, Your Majesty!" Garrett shouted, blocking a strike meant for her. The man who'd once called her worthless now bled to protect her. The irony wasn't lost on Lyra as she fought back to back with her former tormentor. When the guard finally arrived, the attackers were already subdued, defeated not by soldiers, but by the very women they'd sought to terrorize. "You see?" Lyra addressed the captured extremists. "These are the weak Omegas you feared. These are the worthless women you discarded. Look at them now. Strong, united, unbreakable. You created your own downfall the day you decided we were less than human." The Brotherhood crumbled. Its members tried and exiled. But more importantly, the attack had proven something vital. The changes weren't fragile. They were rooted now, strong enough to defend themselves. That night, as healers tended the wounded, Garrett approached Lyra. "I know I have no right to ask," he began, "but I need to know. Can you ever forgive me?" Lyra looked at the man who'd destroyed 5 years of her life. But she also saw the man who'd spent the last year trying to atone, who'd bled defending what he'd once tried to destroy. "I forgive the man you've become," she said carefully. "The man you were. That's harder. But you've proven people can change, truly change. That matters." "It's more than I deserve," he said quietly. "I'll spend whatever years remain to me supporting Phoenix House. It's the least I can do." 3 months later, Lyra woke feeling unusually ill. She attributed it to stress. The Brotherhood's attack had led to increased security concerns, diplomatic negotiations, endless meetings. But when the nausea persisted, accompanied by dizziness and fatigue, Kieran insisted she see Dr. Aldwin. The examination was brief. The doctor's smile was broad. "Your Majesty," he said gently, "you're with child. Approximately 2 months along." The world stopped. After everything, the years of failure, the revelation of lies, the acceptance that it might never happen, she was pregnant. "Are you certain?" she whispered. "Completely certain. The child appears healthy and strong." Kieran's arms were around her instantly, both of them crying, laughing, overwhelmed by the unexpected gift. We weren't trying, Lyra said dazedly. I'd stopped hoping. Sometimes, Dr. Aldwin said wisely, when we stop forcing and start living, nature finds its way. The announcement of the royal pregnancy sent the kingdom into celebration. But for Lyra, the personal joy was mixed with symbolic triumph. The barren Omega cast aside as worthless was now carrying the future heir. The lie could not have been more thoroughly destroyed. At Phoenix House, the residents celebrated with particular fervor. Many sent letters sharing their own pregnancies, their own victories over the lies that had defined them. Your Majesty's baby gives us all hope, one woman wrote. If you can overcome the lies, so can we. But Lyra was careful in her public statements. This pregnancy is a joy, she told the gathered court, but it doesn't define my worth. I was complete before, I am complete now. This child is addition to an already full life, not validation of my existence. As her pregnancy progressed, Lyra continued her work. Phoenix houses opened in 3 more kingdoms. The Phoenix Accords gained international recognition. The culture shifted from questioning women's fertility to accepting that fertility was complex, often unpredictable, never solely one person's responsibility. You've changed the world, Marcus told her one evening as they reviewed expansion plans. We've changed the world, Lyra corrected. Every woman who walked through Phoenix House doors, every noble who admitted their lies, every person who chose truth over comfortable deception. We all changed it together. The night Lyra went into labor, a storm lashed the kingdom. But by dawn, when Princess Hope entered the world with healthy cries, the sun broke through the clouds like a blessing. Hope, Lyra whispered, holding her daughter for the first time. Because that's what Phoenix House gives. That's what truth provides. That's what every forgotten person needs. Hope that tomorrow can be different from yesterday. Kieran kissed both wife and daughter tenderly. She'll grow up in a world where no Omega is forgotten, where no woman is blamed for nature's complexity, where worth isn't conditional. She'll grow up to make it even better, Lyra said firmly. Each generation must go further than the last. As news spread of Princess Hope's birth, Phoenix houses across multiple kingdoms lit ceremonial fires, beacons of hope for all who'd been cast aside, forgotten, or deemed worthless. The forgotten Omega had become an unforgettable queen. But more importantly, she'd ensured no one else would walk her path of unnecessary shame. The phoenix had risen, and its wings sheltered all who needed sanctuary. 10 years had passed since Princess Hope's birth, and the kingdom bore little resemblance to the rigid society Lyra had first encountered. Phoenix houses operated in 37 cities across 12 kingdoms. The Phoenix Accords had become international law. Most remarkably, the very concept of barrenness as female failure had all but vanished from civilized discourse. Lyra stood in her study, reviewing the annual Phoenix Foundation report with satisfaction. Over 10,000 women served. Countless families reunited or rebuilt. An entire generation growing up with different values. Mama, are you working again? Princess Hope burst through the door with the energy of her 10 years. Her gray eyes, so like her father's, sparkled with mischief. Always, Lyra laughed. But I have time for you. What is it? I want to visit Phoenix House, Hope announced. My tutor says I'm old enough to understand your work properly. Behind her, 2 more children appeared, Prince Leo and Princess Luna, the 7-year-old twins who'd arrived 3 years after Hope. More miracles for the barren queen. Me too, Leo declared. I want to see where you help people. Luna, quieter than her twin, simply nodded. She had Lyra's thoughtful nature and an uncanny ability to see through pretense. Very well, Lyra decided. Lord Marcus can escort us this afternoon. The visit to the capital's Phoenix House was revealing. Hope watched everything with intelligent eyes, asking thoughtful questions of residents and staff. Leo charmed everyone with his natural warmth. Luna quietly held the hand of a newly arrived woman who was crying. They're all different, Hope observed to her mother. But they all have the same look when they arrive, like they're broken. They're not broken, Lyra corrected gently. They've been told they're broken. There's a difference. Phoenix House helps them see the truth. Like you were told you were broken? Exactly like that. An elderly woman approached hesitantly. Your Majesty, might I share something? Of course, Lyra said warmly. I was cast aside 50 years ago. 50 years of shame, of believing I was worthless. I only came to Phoenix House last month. My granddaughter insisted. And for the first time in 5 decades, I feel human again. Tears streamed down her weathered face. You gave me that. You gave all of us that. You gave yourself that by having the courage to seek truth, Lyra replied, embracing the woman. I just made sure truth was available. As they toured the facilities, the healing chambers, the skill workshops, the communal gardens where women rebuilt their lives alongside each other, Lyra noticed Hope growing increasingly thoughtful. Mama, the princess said finally, I want to help. When I'm queen, I want to expand this. Not just for women blamed for barrenness, but for everyone society calls worthless. That's my daughter, Kieran said proudly, having joined them for the tour. Already planning to out-revolutionize her mother. That evening brought the 10th anniversary celebration of the Phoenix Accords. Representatives from every signatory kingdom attended, along with thousands of Phoenix House graduates. Lyra addressed the massive gathering from the palace balcony, her family beside her. 10 years ago, I stood here as newly crowned queen, carrying the shame of false barrenness. Today, I stand here as mother of 3, but more importantly, as witness to the transformation of 10,000 lives. Cheers erupted from the crowd. But we're not done, she continued. There are still kingdoms where women bear false shame. Still places where worth is measured by wombs rather than character. Still forgotten people waiting to be remembered. The phoenix must continue to rise. The celebration that followed was joyous, but Lyra found herself in a quiet corner with unexpected company. Lord Garrett of House Pinehurst, now in his 50s and having spent the last decade funding Phoenix houses. I wanted to thank you, he said simply, for giving me the chance to be better than I was. You took that chance yourself, Lyra replied. Many wouldn't have. I think about it sometimes, he admitted. If I hadn't been such a coward, if I'd admitted the truth from the beginning, we might have had children, built a real life together. Perhaps, Lyra said gently. But that path would have led to a different world, one where Phoenix House didn't exist, where thousands of women still lived in shame. Sometimes, our greatest pains lead to our most important purposes. Do you ever wonder what became of her? Garrett asked suddenly. The forgotten Omega at that bonding ceremony? Before the king chose you? Lyra smiled softly. She became who she needed to become. But I carry her still. Her pain made me understand others' suffering. Her forgotten status made me remember others. She's part of every Phoenix House, every woman helped, every lie exposed. As the evening progressed, Lord Marcus approached with his usual impeccable timing, though silver now threaded through his hair. Your Majesties, he said formally, then grinned. I have interesting news. The Northern Empire has agreed to adopt the Phoenix Accords. That makes 15 kingdoms. 15 out of 20 known kingdoms, Kieran mused. Not bad for a decade's work. The remaining 5 are the most traditional, Marcus warned. They see our reforms as direct attacks on their power structures. Good, Lyra said firmly. Those structures need attacking. Later, after the children were asleep, Lyra and Kieran walked through their private garden. The same garden where she'd once hidden from court scrutiny now bloomed with rare plants from every Phoenix House location, gifts from grateful residents. Any regrets? Kieran asked, their traditional question. Only one, Lyra admitted. I wish I could have started sooner. All those women who suffered before we could help them. You can't save everyone, he reminded her gently, but you've saved more than anyone thought possible. A knock interrupted them. Lady Meredith appeared, her face grave. Your Majesties, urgent news. The 5 holdout kingdoms have formed an alliance. They're calling it the Pure Blood Coalition. They've declared Phoenix Houses illegal and threatened war if we continue contaminating their neighbors. Lyra's expression hardened. Then we have work to do. The next morning, Lyra convened an emergency council of all Phoenix Accord nations. Representatives gathered quickly, understanding the threat to everything they'd built. They fear us, the Eastern Territories ambassador said. Our prosperity, our stability, our people's happiness, it makes their oppression obvious. Fear makes people dangerous, Lyra acknowledged, but it also makes them desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. What followed was not war, but something more powerful, a complete economic and social embargo of the Pure Blood Coalition. Trade ceased. Diplomatic relations ended, but more devastatingly, their own people began to rebel. Women in those kingdoms had heard of Phoenix Houses. They knew truth existed beyond their borders. Uprisings began, not violent, but persistent. Women refused to accept blame for failed conceptions. They demanded medical examinations for both partners. They shared hidden copies of Phoenix House literature. Your Majesty, a spy reported 6 months later, the coalition is crumbling from within. 3 kingdoms have secret delegations wanting to negotiate. No negotiations, Lyra decided. Full adoption of Phoenix Accords or nothing. No half measures when women's lives are at stake. One by one, the holdout kingdoms fell, not to armies, but to their own people demanding truth. By year's end, all 20 known kingdoms had signed the Phoenix Accords. But victory brought new challenges. Managing Phoenix houses across such vast territory required massive organization. Ensuring standards remained high, preventing corruption, maintaining the original vision. It was exhausting work. "You need help," Marcus told her bluntly one day, finding her asleep at her desk. "You can't personally oversee every Phoenix house." "But if I don't?" "You train others, trust others, like you did with me, with Meredith, with everyone who's helped build this." He smiled. "Even your children are old enough to help now." Indeed, Hope had begun accompanying her mother to Phoenix house meetings, learning the administrative side of compassion. Leo charmed donors into increased funding. Luna had an uncanny ability to spot when someone was lying about their commitment to reform. "We're building something that will outlast us all," Lyra told her children one evening. "Phoenix houses must survive beyond any one person, even me." "They will," Hope said confidently, "because they're not really about buildings or laws. They're about truth, and truth doesn't die." As Lyra's 47th birthday approached, she received an unexpected gift. A delegation of young women arrived at the palace, all born after Phoenix houses began, all raised in a world where their worth wasn't tied to their wombs. "Your Majesty," their leader said, "we wanted to thank you." "Not for saving us, we never needed saving, but for creating a world where we don't have to be afraid, where we can choose our paths based on our dreams, not our fertility." "My daughter wants to be a merchant," one added. "My friend is studying to be a healer. I'm going to be a soldier. None of us worry about being cast aside if we don't have children. That freedom, that's your gift to us." Lyra wept openly, seeing in these confident young women the future she'd fought to create. A world where being forgotten was impossible because everyone had inherent worth. That night, at her birthday celebration, surrounded by family, friends, and thousands who'd found hope through Phoenix houses, Lyra reflected on the journey. From forgotten Omega to revolutionary queen, from supposed barren woman to mother of three, from worthless to invaluable. "You did it," Kieran whispered, holding her close as they watched their children dance. "You changed the world." "We did it," she corrected. "Every person who chose truth over lies, who fought for change, who refused to accept traditional cruelty. We all did it together." Lord Garrett approached one final time, now elderly and frail. "Your Majesty, I've updated my will. Everything goes to Phoenix houses. It's not enough for what I did to you, but it's enough." Lyra interrupted gently. "You've proven that people can change, truly change. That's worth more than gold." As the celebration continued around them, Lyra found herself thinking of that scared Omega girl at the bonding ceremony 25 years ago. What would she think of all this? "She'd be proud," Luna said quietly, appearing at her elbow with that uncanny perception of hers. "The forgotten girl. She'd be proud of who she became." "How did you get a certain look when you think of her," Luna explained. "Sad, but determined, like you're promising her something." "I promise her every day," Lyra admitted, "that no one else will stand where she stood, feeling what she felt. That's the real legacy of Phoenix House." The phoenix had risen indeed, and its wings now sheltered the world. 25 years after that fateful bonding ceremony, the Great Phoenix Summit drew representatives from all 20 kingdoms, plus 5 newly discovered lands that had immediately adopted the Phoenix Accords upon contact. The gathering celebrated not just the anniversary, but the complete transformation of their world. Queen Lyra Blackthorn, now 52, moved through the crowd with the grace of someone completely comfortable in their skin. The forgotten Omega was long gone, replaced by a woman who'd found her purpose and fulfilled it beyond anyone's wildest dreams. "Grandmother!" a young voice called out. Princess Arya, Hope's 5-year-old daughter, raced through the dignified gathering with the fearlessness of a child who'd never known a world where Omegas were lesser. "Careful, little Phoenix," Lyra laughed, catching her granddaughter. "You'll scandalize the ambassadors." "Let them be scandalized," Hope said, approaching with regal bearing that reminded Lyra powerfully of Kieran. At 25, the crown princess was ready to take the throne, having spent years learning not just to rule, but to serve. "The final session is about to begin," Hope continued. "They're waiting for your address." The great hall was packed with thousands, Phoenix House graduates, administrators, supporters, and those who'd simply come to witness history. Lyra took the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. 25 years ago," she began, "I stood at the back of a bonding ceremony, forgotten and certain I was worthless. I believed I would remain invisible forever, just another casualty of a system that measured women's worth by their wombs alone." The hall was silent, everyone hanging on her words. Today, Phoenix houses serve not just women cast aside for false barrenness, but anyone society deems worthless. The elderly, the disabled, the different, all find sanctuary and support. We've served over 50,000 souls directly, and countless more indirectly through the cultural changes we've fostered. She gestured to a section filled with young people. But our greatest success isn't in numbers. It's in them, the generation raised with different values. Young people who've never known a world where worth is conditional, where fertility defines fate, where being different means being less than. "My own granddaughter," she continued, smiling at Arya, "will grow up in a world where every person is seen, valued, remembered. That's the true victory." Lord Marcus, now bearing the title Chancellor of Phoenix Affairs, presented the summit's findings. His hair was silver now, but his passion for justice remained undimmed. "In 25 years," he reported, "we've not only eliminated false barrenness claims, but reduced actual infertility by 30%. When you remove shame and provide proper medical care to both partners, when you stop assuming women are always at fault, when you create supportive environments, people thrive. Birth rates have increased in every Phoenix Accord nation." Lady Meredith added, now serving as International Phoenix Coordinator. "Not because we forced anyone to have children, but because we created societies where people feel safe bringing children into the world." The statistics were staggering, but Lyra found herself drawn to individual stories, like Sarah Moonwhisper, her distant relative who now ran the largest Phoenix house in the Eastern Territories, or Lady Vivian, who'd betrayed her, but spent 15 years earning redemption through service, or the countless women who'd walked through Phoenix doors believing they were worthless and emerged knowing their value. "Your Majesty," an elderly woman approached during the break. "I was at the first Phoenix house. You probably don't remember me." Lady Ilara of House Ashwood. Lyra said immediately, "You asked for justice, not just sanctuary. How could I forget?" Tears flowed down Ilara's lined face. "You remembered. After all these years, all these thousands of women, you remembered me." "I remember everyone," Lyra said softly. "Every forgotten soul who finds their worth again lives in my heart. That's how we ensure no one remains forgotten." The summit's final day brought unexpected visitors. Lord Garrett of House Pinehurst, now in his final years, arrived in a wheelchair pushed by his heir, not a son of his body, but a young man he'd adopted from Phoenix House, one whose mother had been cast aside by another lying lord. "Your Majesty!" Garrett wheezed, his voice weak but determined. "I needed to see this, to know that my failures led to something beautiful." "Your transformation led to something beautiful," Lyra corrected gently. "You proved that even those who cause great harm can choose to change, to atone, to build rather than destroy." "The boy," Garrett gestured to his adopted son, "he'll inherit everything. Use it for Phoenix houses. Break the Pinehurst line of lies forever." "It's already broken," the young man said firmly. "I carry the name forward not with shame but with purpose. To undo every harm, support every Phoenix house, remember every forgotten soul. That's the new Pinehurst legacy." As Garrett was wheeled away, Lyra marveled at the circular nature of justice. The house that had caused her such pain now devoted itself entirely to healing others' pain. King Kieran found her in their private garden that evening, the same space where she'd hidden as a frightened new queen. Now it bloomed with plants from every corner of their expanded world, gifts from grateful souls touched by Phoenix houses. "Tired?" he asked, pulling her close. "Satisfied," she corrected. "Look what we've built, Kieran. Look what that forgotten Omega accomplished." "She was never truly forgotten," he said softly. "I saw her that day, standing at the back, trying to disappear. But she shone anyway. That's why I chose her." "You chose her because she smelled like moonlight," Lyra teased, referencing his long-ago words. "I chose her because she smelled like hope I didn't know I was looking for," he corrected, "and I've chosen her every day since." Their children found them there. Hope with her husband and young Arya, Leo with his pregnant wife, another Phoenix House graduate who discovered she wasn't barren after all, and Luna, unmarried by choice, but fulfilled in her work expanding Phoenix House services to new populations. "Tell us the story," Arya demanded. "The real story, about the forgotten Omega who became a queen." So Lyra told it one more time, but differently now. Not as a tale of suffering overcome, but as a story of purpose found. She told of the pain that became compassion, the shame that became strength, the invisibility that became the ability to see others. "But the most important part," she concluded, "is that the forgotten Omega didn't just become unforgotten. She made sure no one else would be forgotten either. Every Phoenix house, every changed law, every person who knows their worth, that's her real crown." "Will I have a story like that?" Arya asked solemnly. "You'll have your own story," Hope told her daughter. "But it will build on grandmother's foundation. Each generation goes further than the last." As night fell, the family stood together looking out over their transformed kingdom. Phoenix fires burned in every district, not just at Phoenix houses, but in homes, schools, temples. The eternal flame that said, "You matter, you're seen, you're remembered." "No regrets?" Kieran asked one final time. "None," Lyra said firmly. "Every moment of pain led to this, to them, to a world where no Omega stands forgotten at the back of any gathering." In the distance, a young woman approached the capital's Phoenix house. She was scared, wounded by lies, certain she was worthless. But she'd heard the stories. She knew sanctuary existed. She knew that here, finally, she would be seen. Lyra sensed her somehow, that approaching soul seeking hope. Tomorrow she would visit, would sit with this new arrival, would share her own story of transformation. Because that's what the Phoenix did. It rose again and again, lifting others with its wings. "The work continues," she murmured. "Forever." Her family agreed in unison, and somewhere in the great cosmic tapestry, the forgotten Omega from 25 years past smiled. Her pain had become the world's healing. Her invisibility had become universal sight. Her worthlessness had become immeasurable value. She was forgotten no more, and neither was anyone else. The Phoenix was eternal, its fire undying, its promise unbroken. No one is forgotten forever. Everyone can rise. As the stars wheeled overhead, Phoenix houses. As the stars wheeled overhead, Phoenix houses across 25 kingdoms lit their beacons in perfect synchronization, a constellation of hope stretching across the known world. It had become tradition on this anniversary, each flame representing thousands of lives transformed. "Look, Grandmother!" Arya pointed excitedly. "They're all connected." Indeed, from their high vantage point, the lights seemed to form a pattern, a great phoenix with wings spread across nations, its heart centered here where it all began. "Just like the people," Luna observed quietly, "all connected by shared truth, shared healing, shared purpose." A messenger arrived, bearing urgent news. "Your Majesties, we've received word from the Sunset Islands. They've discovered evidence of systematic fertility deception going back 300 years. They're requesting immediate Phoenix House establishment and asking for Queen Lyra personally." Even now, after all these years, new horrors were still being uncovered. But instead of despair, Lyra felt renewed purpose. "I'll go," she decided immediately. "Mother, you're meant to be stepping back," Hope protested gently. "Let me handle this one." "We'll go together," Lyra compromised. "You to establish the future, me to honor the past. Those women have waited 300 years for truth. They deserve to hear from someone who understands their pain personally." As the family discussed logistics, Lord Marcus's son approached. He'd taken over much of his father's investigative work, carrying on the mission of uncovering truth. "Your Majesty, there's something else. We found records suggesting the fertility deceptions weren't random. They were coordinated across kingdoms, a deliberate strategy to control bloodlines and maintain power structures. There may have been a shadow organization behind it all." "Of course there was," Lyra said grimly. "Systematic oppression is rarely accidental. Add it to the investigation files. Even if the perpetrators are long dead, understanding the full truth matters. The next morning brought a parade through the capital. Phoenix House residents, past and present, walked together, many carrying banners with their stories. Cast aside for 20 years, now I run a merchant empire. Called barren, mother of 5, forgotten no more. But most moving were the young people marching, those who'd grown up in the world Lyra helped create. They carried different banners. Born free, never forgotten, worth isn't conditional. Lyra walked among them, not as queen, but as sister, as survivor, as the first phoenix who showed others they could rise. Kieran walked beside her, their hands clasped, their children and grandchildren surrounding them. "Your Majesty!" A young woman pushed through the crowd, tears streaming. "My great-grandmother, she died believing she was barren. But we found medical records. She wasn't. She lived her whole life in shame for nothing. I wanted you to know her name. Mira Skylark. She should be remembered." "Mira Skylark," Lyra repeated solemnly. "I'll remember her. We'll add her name to the memorial wall at the first Phoenix House, with all the others who didn't live to see the truth." This had become another tradition, recording the names of those who died believing lies about their worth. The memorial wall stretched around the entire Phoenix House complex now, thousands upon thousands of names. Each one a promise that their suffering wasn't forgotten, that it had led to change. As the parade concluded at the great Phoenix House, Lyra found herself in the exact spot where she'd welcomed the first residents 25 years ago. The building had expanded dramatically, but the heart remained the same, a place where the forgotten found themselves. "Tell them," Hope urged quietly. "One more time." Lyra looked out at the sea of faces, residents, graduates, supporters, her own family, and yes, even former enemies who'd learned to change. She thought of that terrified Omega girl who'd believed she was nothing. What would she think now? "She'd be amazed," came a familiar voice. Lyra turned to find Lord Garrett being wheeled forward by his adopted son. Despite his frailty, he'd insisted on attending. "She wouldn't believe it possible," he continued, his voice barely a whisper but carrying clearly. "That forgotten Omega. I helped break her. My lies, my cowardice, my pride. But she didn't stay broken. She became this—" He gestured weakly at the crowd, the building, the banners of triumph. "She became hope for millions." "We all became hope," Lyra corrected gently. "Every person who chose truth over comfortable lies, who fought for change, who refused to accept that anyone is worthless. We're all phoenixes, rising together." As if summoned by her words, a murmuration of birds suddenly filled the sky. Thousands of them moving as one, forming shapes that looked almost like flames, like wings, like promise made manifest. "The phoenixes!" Arya shrieked with delight. It was a rare species that had been nearly extinct, saved by conservation efforts Phoenix houses had funded. They'd become another symbol of resurrection, of beauty rising from near destruction. The birds circled once, twice, then settled in the trees surrounding Phoenix House, living reminders that what seems lost can be saved, what seems worthless can soar. That evening, at the grand ball celebrating the anniversary, Lyra found herself dancing with Kieran to the same music that had played at their bonding ceremony. "Do you remember?" he asked softly. "That terrified girl in the receiving line, certain she didn't belong?" "I remember," Lyra confirmed. "But she did belong. She just needed someone to see it." "You see everyone now," he observed. "That's your true gift. Not just rising yourself, but making sure everyone rises." The ball swirled around them. Nobles and commoners, alphas and omegas, all designations mixing freely in a way that would have caused riots 25 years ago. Young Hope danced with her husband while keeping one eye on Aria, who was charming the Sunset Islands delegation with 5-year-old enthusiasm. Leo waltzed with his pregnant wife, both glowing with joy. Luna stood with Lord Marcus and Lady Meredith, deep in discussion about new Phoenix House initiatives. Even Lady Vivian was there, gray-haired now, but still serving faithfully at Phoenix House, her early betrayal transformed into decades of dedicated service. "Your Majesties," a young couple approached nervously. We wanted to thank you. We met at Phoenix House. Both of us had been cast aside, told we were defective, worthless, but we found each other, found truth, found love. Our daughter was born last month. We named her Lyra. "Little Lyra," the Queen said warmly, touching the baby's tiny hand. "May you grow up in a world that always sees your worth." As the evening progressed, more stories emerged. Couples who'd found each other at Phoenix House. Children born to parents who'd been told they never could. Businesses built by women who'd been discarded. Lives rebuilt from ashes of lies. "The ripples," Meredith observed, joining them. "You threw a stone 25 years ago, and the ripples just keep spreading." But the night's greatest surprise came when a delegation from beyond the known kingdoms arrived. People from lands so distant their existence had been merely rumor. "We've traveled for months," their leader explained. "Stories reached us of Phoenix houses, of a queen who remembers the forgotten. Our society. We have similar lies, similar shames. Will you help us?" "We'll all help." Hope stepped forward, every inch the future queen. "That's what Phoenix houses do. Spread truth, restore worth, remember the forgotten. No distance is too great for that mission." As plans were made to establish Phoenix houses in these new lands, Lyra felt the profound satisfaction of legacy assured. The work would continue beyond her lifetime, beyond her children's lifetimes. The Phoenix was truly eternal now. The celebration continued until dawn, when tradition demanded one final ceremony. All Phoenix House residents, past and present, gathered in the courtyard. Each held a candle, unlit. Lyra stood before them with the original Phoenix flame, lit 25 years ago and never extinguished, carefully tended and transferred as needed. "This fire represents truth," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "It began with one forgotten Omega learning she'd been lied to. But truth, like fire, spreads. Each of you carries it now. Each of you is the Phoenix, rising and helping others rise." One by one, they lit their candles from hers. The flame passed from person to person until thousands of lights filled the courtyard, the warmth tangible, the symbolism profound. "No one is forgotten," they chanted together, a promise and a prayer. "Everyone can rise. The Phoenix is eternal." As the sun rose on a new day, painting the sky in shades of hope, Lyra stood surrounded by the fruits of 25 years of labor. The forgotten Omega had become unforgettable, but more importantly, she'd made forgotten itself an obsolete concept. In her arms, little Aria stirred, having fallen asleep during the ceremony. "Grandmother," she murmured sleepily, Will you tell me the story again tomorrow? Every day if you want, Lyra promised. But remember, it's not just my story. It's everyone's story. Every person who was told they were worthless and proved otherwise. Every soul who rose from ashes, every phoenix who helped another fly. The eternal phoenix, Hope said softly, understanding complete in her eyes. Eternal, Lyra agreed, looking out at the new dawn, the spreading light, the endless possibility of a world where no one would ever be forgotten again. The forgotten Omega story had ended. The eternal Phoenix's legacy would never die. And somewhere in every kingdom, in every Phoenix house, in every heart that had learned its worth, the fire burned on. Forever and always, until the last forgotten soul was remembered, until the last lie became truth, until every person knew what Lyra had learned 25 years ago. You matter. You're seen. You're remembered. You're worthy. You can rise. And together we all shall.